Welcome to the Plant-Free MD podcast with Dr. Anthony Chafee, where we discuss diet and nutrition and how this affects health and chronic disease, and show you how you can use this to optimize your health and happiness, both mentally and physically. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Anthony Chafee here again with another episode of the Plant-Free MD. And today I have a very special guest and someone I'm very excited to talk to, Dr. Chris Palmer, who is an assistant professor of psychiatry at Harvard University and the author of the book Brain Energy that just came out. And my Patreon members are now reading it this month for our book club. So thank you very much, Dr. Palmer.
Thank you for having me on, Dr. Chafee, and thanks for picking Brain Energy as one of your books.
No, absolutely. Well, I was excited for it when it came out because I've been aware peripherally of your work, and so I was very, very interested in your book when it came out. I've sort of long thought that diet plays a much larger role in disease, and especially chronic disease, and that I have a sort of a theory that you don't have to agree with just because you're here, but that that most of the chronic diseases that we treat nowadays are not diseases per se, but quite a lot of them are toxicities and malnutrition, the toxic buildup of species inappropriate diet and a lack of species specific nutrition. And the further we go away from our biologically evolved diet, the more sort of problems we're going to have, just like other animals will have in the zoo or in nature. You say, here's the sign, don't feed the animals. They get very sick and we get sick too. We're not recognizing this as an exposure relationship as opposed to a disease relationship. So I was very excited when your work came out and seemed to go in line with that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think I probably, in the book, I expand beyond just diet, and I think more broadly about environment. So, and environment includes, other lifestyle factors like being on your cell phone all day or a computer as opposed to moving around. Any stress that might cause. I'm particularly interested in all the environmental toxins that are both in our food supply, but also just, in our water supply and everywhere else. And who knows, I think we have some preliminary evidence they are not doing good things for human health. Mm-hmm. So how to weigh them all is unclear, but the really exciting thing for me is that I can, everybody kind of already knows, well, that plays a role in obesity. That stuff plays a role in diabetes and heart disease. Everybody kind of knows that. I think the exciting thing for me is that I get to bring mental illness into the picture too and say, hey, the brain is part of the body too.
Yeah, well, it is. And that's a very good point. People don't actually think about the brain and the mind as being an actual physical organ that can be damaged and disrupted by chemical means.
Yeah. People just think that they're just thoughts in your head, and everybody's got control over the thoughts in their head. And if they don't have control over the thoughts of their head, they just need to try harder and get control over those thoughts. So if you're having anxiety, just stop it. Just stop. Yeah. Stop having anxiety. If you're being depressed, look on the bright side. Come on. Yeah. Look on the bright side. Count your blessings. Practice gratitude. That'll fix you. Take some deep breaths. All of those things are ways to clear those bad thoughts from your head, and that should solve your problem. And unfortunately, it doesn't work that way, and it's not so simple, at least not for a lot of people. If taking deep breaths and practicing gratitude works for you, I'm all for it. That's great that you found your answer. But unfortunately, for the majority of people, those things don't work.
No, there was a great piece by Mad TV. Actually, they had Bob Newhart on as a guest, and he played this psychologist or therapist. And the person came in, they said like, okay, well, it's going to be very quick. I never take more than 5 minutes. It'll be very quick. And the lady told him her problems. He said, okay, I'm just going to tell you 3 words and I want you to internalize them and take them home with you. And he just yelled at her, stop it. And she's, what? And every time she said something, well, I have this problem, he just screamed at her, stop it, just stop it. And it was very funny how they did that. And it would be nice if that were as easy as that, to just be like, okay, well, okay, you're doing this, that's a problem. Okay, stop it. And just stop it. But obviously it's not that simple.
If only it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey guys, just want to take a second to thank our sponsor at Carnivore Bar. I don't promote many products because honestly, all you need to be healthy is to just eat meat. For those times that you're out hiking, road tripping, or stuck at work and you want a nutritious snack that is just meat, fat, and salt if you want it, the Carnivore Bar is a great option. So I like this product not because it's just pure meat, but also because I want the carnivore market to thrive as well. And the more we support meat-only products, the more meat-only products there will be available in the mainstream. So if this sounds like something you'd like to get behind, check it out using my discount code Anthony to get 10% off, which also applies to subscriptions, giving you 25% off total. All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. So I'd love to talk about the book, Brain Energy. I thought it was fascinating. I haven't finished it yet myself. I'm in the middle of reading it. I absolutely love it. And I love how you get really deep into detail about the structure and function of the mitochondria and how much of a role this plays in mental health. And but before we get into that, I'd love to hear you tell us, how you came to this idea in the first place that diet played such a significant role in mental health.
It's all a story of serendipity for me, for better or worse. I didn't set out to do what I ended up doing. And the story, I'll do the quick version. Happy to get into details if you want to on any of these particular aspects. But the quick and dirty version is, I actually struggled with mental illness when I was a kid. I went through some really horrible shit in my family and spent a period of time homeless. Really struggled in high school with severe depression, suicidality, all sorts of adverse social things. Pulled myself together, but by the time I was in my 20s, had metabolic syndrome, was doing a low-fat diet, was exercising regularly, was not officially overweight, had never had a weight problem. If anything, I was underweight, I was thin. Year after year, the doctor's trying to push drugs on me. And I finally tried the Atkins diet at the time. And lo and behold, it got rid of my metabolic syndrome. That was my goal. I just wanted to get rid of my metabolic syndrome, but I noticed dramatic improvement in my mental health. I noticed significant improvement in mood, energy, concentration, sleep. I start recommending it to friends and family. They start having equal kind of improvements in mood, energy. I start using it in treatment-resistant depression patients. So I've got tons of them in my clinic. They've tried dozens of antidepressants and mood stabilizers and antipsychotics and everything else. Some of them had been in therapy for years or decades. Some of them have tried ECT. And I'm changing their diet. And for at least some of them, it's working in a powerful, dramatic way. It's like it has the potency of a medication, but this is one that actually is working as opposed to just trying med after med that does not work. And so I'm like flabbergasted that, wow, this is like, one of my patients even got hypomanic. And I was like, what the hell is going on? This is impossible. Like, a diet is causing hypomania. This is like crazy. Mm-hmm. I laid low because I was like, this is, nobody's going to believe this. I'm going to lose my license if I start talking about this. I'm just going to do my thing. Try to help the people in front of me, keep my day job, just go along. And then in 2016, I helped one of my patients with schizoaffective disorder, which is a cross between schizophrenia and bipolar. I help him lose weight using a ketogenic diet. No, I had no conception that it was going to help his symptoms. And lo and behold, within 2 months, it didn't happen overnight, but within 2 months, he's dramatically less depressed, but much more importantly, hallucinations are going away, delusions are going away. He starts regaining the ability to function in the world, to go out in public, to do schoolwork, he actually could perform improv in front of a live audience. He was able to do all sorts of things that would have been impossible for him And that was the point that I decided I can't stay quiet about this anymore. This is impossible. This is literally impossible. This is too important to, this is too important of a finding, because people with schizophrenia and even bipolar disorder, their lives are decimated a lot of times. And our treatments suck, and everybody knows it. Everybody with those disorders knows it, and every clinician knows it. Like, we all know that is the most heartbreaking thing to say to a patient if you're in the mental health field. You have schizophrenia. That is the most heartbreaking thing. It is like saying you have terminal cancer. I'm really sorry, but you have terminal cancer. You're fucked, and there's nothing we can do for you. And so I'm like, wait, this diet is changing his schizophrenia and making it go away. So I'm collaborating with researchers and everything. Now I'm like, people from all over the world, researchers, clinicians, patients are reaching out to me. I'm treating dozens of people now, seeing sometimes miraculous remissions of illness, some people getting off all their meds. So now I'm really in hot pursuit of ketogenic diet is a treatment for mental illness. I went down the path of the epilepsy version of the ketogenic diet, really focused on, this isn't a diet. This is a medical therapeutic intervention for epilepsy. And we use epilepsy treatments all the time. So that's what I'm doing here. But I didn't stop there, because I'm thinking, wait, like, I could just stop at ketogenic diet as a therapeutic intervention for mental illness. And there's lots of research now happening. We've got 5 controlled trials underway. Other researchers are pursuing this. That is happening. People are really excited and passionate about seeing that work progress. But I didn't stop there. I'm like, wait, I'm putting schizophrenia into remission off meds. That's not supposed to happen. Schizophrenia is supposed to be a genetic, lifelong disorder. That's what we tell people now. Genetic, lifelong disorder. You're fucked. Stage 4 cancer fucked. And that's not what's happening here. I'm putting these disorders into remission. So I need to understand what the hell is happening. Like, what is going on here? And how can I understand it? And how can it help us in the mental health field? How can it help us better understand these disorders? So I go on this deep scientific dive to try to figure out, how can I even make sense of this? And out the other end comes basically brain energy, which is beyond all expectations, beyond my wildest dreams. I'm like, wait, the more I dove into the science, the more I realized, wait, we can connect a lot of dots here. This isn't just about diet. It's not just about schizophrenia. This is about all mental illness. And this is about connecting the biological, psychological, and social causes of mental illness, putting it all together, certainly helping us understand and support why a dietary intervention can be a powerful, powerful intervention for the brain, but also helps us understand drugs and alcohol, helps us understand stress and trauma and adverse childhood events. It helps us put all of the picture together. And so obviously I'm super excited about it all.
Yeah, well, definitely. And, the more I sort of look at things, the more diseases and problems come down to the mitochondria and the problems thereof. And this was something that was being studied quite, in depth with, Otto Warburg, was a Nobel Prize winner in medicine. And he came up with the theory on the origin of cancer in his paper in 1951, talking about how this is a mitochondrial metabolic disease. This is a matter of disruption of oxidative phosphorylation and all the problems derived thereof, and picked up later by other other researchers, but it's been sort of overshadowed, with everyone just saying everything's genetic. It's genetic, it's genetic, it's genetic. And as with, schizophrenia and other mental disorders, it's just, no, this is genetics. It's just the hand that you're dealt, and that's it. And there's nothing we can do about it. And of course, if that's the assumption of the mechanism of the etiology, then you're going to have a very different treatment modality than if you're going down the mitochondrial pathway. And so, some of these treatments, like you say, they're not very effective. Like, what is the effectiveness of the current treatments that we have for major depression, anxiety, schizoaffective, or schizophrenia in general?
So the sad news that a lot of people really aren't aware of is that our current treatments are not very effective. So for bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, most people know our treatments suck. Most people know that. Because again, schizophrenia is like a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. Like at best, we're going to be able to deliver palliative care, keep people out of jails, try to keep people alive, try to prevent them from assaulting other people. But that's the best that we can hope for. They basically become sedated zombies living at home alone, or with their parents, or in a group home, or in a nursing home, or in a state hospital. And they stay to themselves, they stay quiet because we sedate them. We give them massive doses of sedating medications. And if you look at the long-term outcomes of people with schizophrenia, so one study followed over 6,000 patients for, I think, 4 years, all treated at academic medical centers. Only 4% of the patients recovered from their illness.
Wow.
Only 4%. 96% of people getting treatment. These are the patients getting treatment. It's not the homeless people who are refusing treatment. These are the patients actually cooperating with treatment. 96% are not getting all the way better and staying better. So that's not that surprising, though. Well, most people are like, well, yeah, schizophrenia, that's a horrible diagnosis, and our treatments suck, and everybody knows it. With major depression is now the leading cause of disability on planet Earth.
Wow.
It is not because those people aren't getting treatment. It's because our treatments fail to work for far too many of those people. So one study followed people getting treatment for major depression for 12 years. Hundreds of people all getting treatment, and they could get any treatment they wanted. They were all at academic medical centers. They could get psychotherapy or ECT or TMS or change antidepressants or add some mood stabilizers, add some antipsychotics, do whatever the clinician thinks is the best thing to do. 90% of them did not get better and stay better. 90%. Even though we have dozens of antidepressants and mood stabilizers and ECT and ketamine and now psychedelics and everything else, 90% aren't getting better. So we need new ways to think about and treat mental illness.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in your study of this, how effective is, I assume that the major intervention is ketogenic diet. Is that the main treatment modality that you're using at the moment, or is there more to it?
There's more to it. So I outline a lot of things that can impair metabolism in the book. Mm-hmm. And so the way that I kind of go about treating patients now is I look at what are all the things that this person is exposed to or doing that are impairing their metabolism. Bad diet is clearly one of the things in a lot of people, but it could also be stress. It could be heavy alcohol use or smoking cigarettes, heavy marijuana use, but it could also be, unfortunately, prescription medications. Unfortunately, we prescribe a lot of medications that impair mitochondrial function and impair metabolism. And we know that, and the easy way to know that is that any medication that makes you gain weight, that makes you diabetic, that causes heart attacks or strokes, the concrete way is if you take a medicine and it slows you down and you feel slowed down by it, that is impairing your metabolism, plain and simple. And unfortunately, those are some standard treatments in psychiatry. We prescribe those pills all the time to people. So in my treatment strategy, the first thing is to identify all the things that are impairing metabolism and try to come up with a plan to slowly but surely reduce or eliminate them. And that can take some time. Getting people to stop using alcohol or smoke cigarettes or get off prescription meds can take time. It needs to be done safely. But then I'm looking at strategies. How can we improve this person's metabolism? How can we help them heal? And that almost always involves a change in diet. So a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet or lots of other dietary strategies can play a powerful role in improving metabolism. But I'm not stopping there. I'm also getting these people exercising and moving. I'm making sure they're getting good sleep, other things. I'm making sure they actually start having something to do, like having a purpose in their life. Like you can't just sit around your apartment all day or your father's home all day anymore. We've got to get you moving and participating in society again, because it's stressful to sit around and feel like you're useless. That alone, it's stressful. If you force a human being and say you're useless to society, nobody wants you, nobody needs you, you're just disabled, that alone causes mental symptoms. That alone causes depression in most people, and it can add on itself. So I'm looking at kind of all of this comprehensive treatment plan. There is no doubt, I don't want to underplay the role of diet, because that has been the linchpin. I have come across so many patients who come to me and say, I've already done all these other things, Dr. Palmer. I've done all of them. I'm doing them. I'm meditating and working and reducing my stress and sleeping good. And I got off all bad substances and I still have bipolar disorder, or I still have depression, or and then I change their diet and poof, everything becomes a miracle cure. And it's just like, wow. And yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. And so that sort of gets us to, your theory on what's the underlying, problem that's going on with these mental disorders. You feel that there's a unifying theory behind that. Is that right?
Yes. So I am arguing in the book that at the end of the day, all mental disorders are metabolic disorders. Mm-hmm. So in the same way that people can have a metabolic disorder of obesity or diabetes or cardiovascular disease, and those disorders affect different organs. They affect your fat cells or your heart or your pancreas or your insulins, and glucose systems. The brain can be affected by metabolic problems too. And when the brain is affected by metabolic problems, it starts to malfunction. And that means that you can get all sorts of symptoms of mental illness. But at the end of the day, when you ask like some basic common sense questions, well, what does that mean? What does it mean to have a metabolic problem? Like exactly how are obesity and diabetes and heart attacks connected? Like what actually connects them? What is it? I know a popular thing right now is to say it's insulin and insulin resistance. I actually think that is not sufficient in and of itself. It is a key player and it is a key biomarker, actually. I really do believe that. So I don't think it's wrong, but I don't think it in and of itself is sufficient to explain all metabolic problems. And instead, I think you have to go to mitochondria. And once you understand mitochondria and what causes them to become dysfunctional, the more I learned about this over the last 7 years, the more excited I became. And I actually at a few points, I was had to ask friends, am I going crazy? because I think I'm really connecting all the dots of mental illness. This can't be really happening. I must be dreaming, or maybe I'm really going crazy and like I'm going to be admitted to a hospital or something. Like, I don't know. But so to share with people the to take a step back from that and let you know, I don't think I'm crazy. I question, but I don't think I am. I've come to the conclusion I don't think I'm crazy. And several leading psychiatrists and neuroscientists have endorsed this book, so they don't think I'm crazy either. So it's not complete quackery and craziness. I think that the thing to point out is that I'm not making this theory up out of thin air. I'm simply taking all of the existing research in the mental health field and trying to put it together in one coherent way. It's like all of the different research studies in my mind are like pieces of a puzzle. And that puzzle needs to be put together to form one clear picture. And that is what I'm doing with this theory is, this research goes back centuries. The connections between diabetes and mental illness goes back to the 1800s. Researchers were writing about that. Since the 1940s, researchers have identified metabolic problems like glucose, insulin, lactate, and other metabolic kind of biomarkers. We've known that there are metabolic problems in the brains and bodies of people with mental illness since the 1940s. All the brain scans that we're doing, guess what they're all measuring? They're all measuring metabolism, brain metabolism. So in some ways, this is kind of nothing new. It's just taking all of the existing research, but putting it together in a clear, coherent way. The groundbreaking thing, I think, is really on all of the different roles that mitochondria play. And this has not been known forever. I think one of the reasons this is so exciting is because this is cutting edge research. And it's primarily taking place in other fields. It's not taking place, some of it is taking place in the mental health field. And there are absolutely mental health professionals who are going to feel like, Chris Palmer, how dare you steal my ideas? These are my ideas. These are the things I've been working on. And how dare you try to take credit or, what? Make no mistake. I am using all of their work, all of their research. I am standing up on their shoulders. If they had not done that research, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have a book. I wouldn't have a theory. So I am not trying to steal their thunder. I am not trying to steal credit. It is important to give credit where credit is due. But this is about taking it all and putting it all together. And I have never seen anybody else put it together in the way that I've put it together. If they have, I welcome the opportunity to see it, but I've never seen it. But I think the thing that's so exciting is that once you understand mitochondria, you can start to understand neurotransmitter kind of abnormalities or imbalances. You can understand hormonal imbalances. You can understand the role of inflammation. You can even the gene expression. Mitochondria are like the key regulators of epigenetics. And so everybody's like, schizophrenia is a genetic disease. Well, no, it's an epigenetic disease. It involves abnormalities in the expression of genes. And mitochondria are the way to understand that. And then once you understand this big picture, it opens up entirely new treatments like a dietary change.
Yeah. And, which is really exciting as well. It's harder to package that. And so, maybe that's why industrial sort of research hasn't gone down that track, because, you're looking for some sort of, pharmaceutical, and that's perfectly reasonable. It makes sense that they would. But it would be even nicer for people if they didn't have to go down that route and could do something where their bodies would just work better on their own, which is sort of a novel thought, and just allowing your body just to get on with things. So what is it about mitochondria that leads to mental disorders?
So this was one of the key parts of developing this theory. And Because the more I read about mitochondria, I hadn't seen anyone really try to break it into concrete kind of clear pathways of like what happens when mitochondria aren't functioning in a cell. Like, what are the consequences of that? I saw tons, literally thousands of research articles. Almost all of them would focus on one aspect or another, or maybe a few, and they would quickly get lost in the weeds of complexity, like all of these biochemical pathways, like this enzyme produces this molecule, which then goes to this part of the cell and triggers this receptor. And they tell that part of the story, but that's a tiny part of the story. And so when I was developing this theory, I tried to read all of these articles, but always stepping back and trying to see the bigger picture. Like, how can we make sense of this? And how can I help other people understand this? And so at the end of the day, I've identified 5 clear consequences of mitochondrial dysfunction. 2 of them are, and I go into detail in the book, but 2 of them are particularly important to answer your question. How does mitochondrial dysfunction result in mental illness? I'll actually mention 3. So one of them is that mitochondria play a critical role in neurodevelopment. And that means some people with neurodevelopmental disorders, like autism, may have had metabolic or mitochondrial problems as they were developing. And that resulted in a neurodevelopmental disorder like autism, or like a learning disorder, or epilepsy, or something else. And a lot of people think, that's one of the criticisms I've gotten is, well, if this is all metabolic, what does autism have to do with diet? There's no connection there. These are kids. These kids were drinking breast milk. How are you blaming diet on autism? But let me share one quick statistic to help clear that up. I didn't do this in the book, so I'll share it with you now. Mothers who are diabetic and obese have 3 to 4 times the rate of having an autistic child. Men who are obese have double the chances of having an autistic child. In case you didn't know it, we have epidemics of obesity and diabetes in our population, and that includes people who are having kids. So when people are like, where the hell is all this autism coming from? Because autism rates have tripled in the last 20 years. And everybody's scratching their heads. Where is all this autism coming from? That can't possibly be true. And people must be making this shit up. They're just overdiagnosing autism. What I'm here to say is, no, they're not overdiagnosing autism. They are accurately diagnosing autism. Where is it coming from? It's coming from the obesity and metabolic epidemics that are occurring in our population and in those people's parents. And so neurodevelopment is one of the things. The bigger consequences of mitochondrial dysfunction are that, in a nutshell, cells can become underactive or overactive. And that's a paradox. It really is a paradox that cells can become underactive or overactive. But that was actually the critical piece of developing this theory and helping us understand so much about, like, why do some of our metabolically toxic treatments reduce symptoms? That paradox actually helps us understand that. But when I say underactive, so brain cells can be underactive or overactive, or they can be normal. So if they're normal, that means you're healthy, you're doing your thing, you are a normal human being. Everybody looking at you thinks you're a normal person, you're just doing your stuff. Doesn't mean you don't get depressed or anxious. Everybody gets depressed and anxious. If bad stuff happens to you or if somebody threatens you, that all happens. That's normal. But an underactive brain system might result in, parts of your brain that should be helping you concentrate or pay attention, maybe underactive. And if those brain areas are underactive, it might result in symptoms that we call attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Or if memory cells that are supposed to be helping you store memories, if those are underactive, it means that you're going to be forgetful or maybe have memory impairment. Overactive cells, a clear example is that we all have anxiety pathways in our brain. If those cells are metabolically compromised and hyper excitable or overactive, it means that you could have anxiety or a panic attack out of the blue for no reason. And that would get diagnosed as anxiety or an anxiety disorder. I'll stop there, but obviously I could go on and on and on about all of this. So I'm sorry if I'm long-winded.
No, not at all. No, it's all very interesting. And, it's interesting that you mentioned autism and diet as well, because that's something that when I started looking into, carnivore diet or biologically appropriate diet, and if this was carnivore, and what that meant, and I started asking questions, and I started asking questions of the literature, and I said, okay, if this is true, if my theory is true, we should see X in the literature. And so I started looking, and one of my thoughts was, is autism related to diet? Because like you say, it's tripled in the last few decades. That has matched the increase in other metabolic diseases and heart disease, diabetes, even cancer, autoimmune disorders, all these things. They all sort of started going up around the same time. So I started asking myself, okay, is autism diet related as well? And I started looking in the literature, and I thought, okay, well, could it be with sugar? Could it be with metabolic issues? Could it be with, avoiding meat, going away from this? And so I actually found a number of studies. There was one that looked at the diet of women pre-conception, and they found 14 foods that all showed a significant reduction in their, correlated with less children having autism. All of them were meat-based. Then women that had higher saturated fat intake and LDL cholesterol during pregnancy had lower rates of children with autism. Women who breastfed versus bottle fed, lower rates of children with autism. They didn't distinguish between pumping and formula, but quite a lot of people who do bottle feed would use formula, which is a lot of cornstarch and sugar, as opposed to the normal ingredients in breast milk. And then the other one I thought was very interesting. All of these are obviously correlative, but there was one that actually showed a stronger link, and even a causative link, from Texas A&M, that found that there was an increased rate of autism in people who were vegetarian and vegan. And they found that this was due to lack of carnitine, that some children were deficient in making carnitine. Obviously, this is something we consider a non-essential amino acid, but it's not unessential to everyone. And so this doesn't exist in plants, carnitine. And so we have to get it from meat if we need it. And so these kids, if they're not making enough carnitine and they're not getting it in the meat, then they can get neural misdevelopment. And so I thought that was very interesting. So I thought that was very interesting, seeing that you found that relationship between neurodevelopmental issues such as autism and diet as well.
Absolutely. And to support, in support of everything you just said, so carnitine is actually critical to mitochondrial function. And so if you actually look at, what exactly is carnitine doing? It's all about mitochondria. It's all about getting nutrients and fats into mitochondria so that they can process fat as a fuel source. But it's also about their normal function. And to take it back, just so people know, because you mentioned a lot of correlational studies, they're dating back to the 1980s. Researchers have identified mitochondrial deficits in people with autism spectrum disorders. So in the 1980s, the mitochondrial theory of autism was actually first proposed. And numerous researchers have continued to build on that and continue, like the evidence just keeps accumulating, and all of the different factors. It's not that there is one and only one cause of autism or one and only one cause of mitochondrial dysfunction. There are numerous causes. And again, they include biological, psychological, and social. absolutely, though, diet is a key player in metabolism and mitochondrial function. There is no way around it. Diet is critical. And when you look at all of the different risk factors for autism spectrum disorder, they all converge on mitochondria. So it makes perfect sense. I think in support of what you're saying, like even going beyond autism, I mean, there was a study, I think it was done in India, where a lot of people are vegan or vegetarian, and researchers actually supplemented children's diet with some meat. It wasn't even a lot, just a little bit of meat early in life. And it was a randomized controlled trial. Half the kids, hundreds of kids, half of them did not get the extra meat. Half of them got the extra meat. The ones who got the meat had higher IQs, statistically significant higher IQs. Wow. And those researchers actually said it is unconscionable that we are not giving meat to all kids. And it is unconscionable that we are talking about plant-based diets when this like impacts brain development and cognition and intelligence.
Yeah, I think I saw a similar study. Maybe it was that one, but they gave these kids one egg. Just one egg a day seemed to make a statistically significant difference in their IQ, which is amazing. You know, I mean, just that little.
It is
much.
Eggs are like, I think so, you know, there was a social media meme going around. Eggs are like a multivitamin. Yeah. They've got lots of nutrients in them.
Yeah. And you should just take them like that. I mean, like, I'm just taking my vitamins.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that sort of begs a question. So are these treatment modalities of addressing the mitochondrial metabolic function of the cell, is that beneficial in autism as well?
So
or do you have studies?
It's a really important question. And we do have a few studies, very small pilot trials of the ketogenic diet for autism. And for the most part, there are some benefits to kids with autism. So sometimes there's improvement in cognition. Much more importantly, there's improvement in mood. But improvement in the social skills is usually not there. Mm-hmm. There are one or two case reports that have been published in the medical literature, and I know, you know, there's a Netflix, I think, documentary out there where people are claiming that they can cure autism. And if that is happening, I don't mean to take away from that. But the way I see it is autism is a neurodevelopmental issue. Mm-hmm. And so like people need to acquire social skills at the right time of neurodevelopment, at the right age. And if they miss that opportunity, like we go through what are called developmental windows, and these windows open, but then they close. And if you don't acquire certain skills or brain circuits or brain connections in the right way at the right developmental time, you can lose that opportunity. It's as simple as a cleft lip. Cleft lip is a developmental problem. The cells didn't develop. That can become permanent. It's not that we can't do surgery and try to fix it, but we can't like change a diet and expect that cleft lip to fill in.
Yeah.
We can't give that person even a pill and expect that cleft lip to fill in. That cleft lip is a developmental issue. And the development didn't happen in the correct way at the correct time. And that can result in a permanent kind of change in that person. And I strongly suspect that autism is going to involve at least some features along those lines. That if humans don't acquire social skills by the age of 10, it's going to be increasingly difficult, if not impossible, to teach them the exact same social skills that other people have. Doesn't mean we can't mitigate or improve, change. And again, people with autism have, or autistic people, because I really want to be respectful. These are human beings. They didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing. Some of them are the most brilliant scientists and business people on our planet right now. So autistic people sometimes rule the world. So I don't want to diminish them or their worth or anything. But autistic people have higher rates of all the mental disorders and many neurological disorders. They have much higher rates of seizures, but also depression and schizophrenia and bipolar and OCD and other symptoms. And those, I think, can be corrected with changes in diet or other metabolic strategies.
Okay. And I mean, that makes perfect sense. This is a developmental issue. And once the brain is developed, those pathways are developed. I mean, brain is plastic, certainly, but it's not that plastic. It's not going to just completely, will be able to develop past a certain point once it's already sort of set. But I suppose it could be looked at if you sort of catch it early enough and then start addressing these metabolic issues, might have better outcomes, hopefully.
There is no doubt in my mind, this is an opportunity for major prevention efforts, and it's across the board. So if you have a young child who is not developing normally in any way, cognition, social skills, or otherwise, and that can often be identified at a young age. And sometimes parents notice it. Sometimes parents will say, my kid was perfectly normal, got a severe infection, had to be hospitalized for that infection, and was never the same after. That tells us that there has been a metabolic assault in the form of an infection. And we know, and I walked through some of that science even, of how an infection can impact mitochondrial function and then result in a neurodevelopmental disorder. But as soon as we identify that problem, we can implement strategies right then and there to mitigate and or correct any developmental issues. And I do believe that we can potentially prevent disorders. To give you another clear example and maybe move on from autism, there was one study that followed 5,000 kids. The kids with the highest levels of insulin resistance beginning at age 9 had a 5-fold increased rate of being at risk for developing schizophrenia or bipolar disorder by the time they turned 24.
Wow.
5-fold, that's 500% increase. So when you usually look at diet studies, they're like, oh, this results in a 10% increased risk for this. I'm talking 500% increased risk. That is not trivial. That should not be ignored. Insulin is a biomarker we can measure today. Glucose levels are biomarkers we can measure today. And if you have a 9-year-old kid with already showing signs of insulin resistance, you can use diet and exercise and other lifestyle strategies to correct that insulin resistance and potentially prevent cases of schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. So I really think this is a new day in the mental health field.
Absolutely. And so what is it about a ketogenic diet that affects the mitochondria so much?
That was the thing that led me on this. That was the thing that led me on this path. And we have tons of evidence that the ketogenic diet affects neurotransmitters. It decreases insulin, improves insulin signaling or insulin resistance, changes gene expression, does all these different things. But at the end of the day, I had to narrow in on mitochondria. And there are two critical things that the ketogenic diet does that are really highly unique. It results in something called mitophagy, which is essentially a process that the body uses to get rid of old or defective mitochondria and replace them with new ones. And then it also stimulates a process called mitochondrial biogenesis, which basically means the production of new mitochondria. And so when people have done a ketogenic diet for months or years, their cells will actually have more mitochondria, and those mitochondria will be healthier. And that allows those cells to function better. And I actually think that is the magic ingredient of the ketogenic diet for people, at least with mental disorders.
Yeah. Wow. And then, so this is why a lot of people would, tout the benefits of fasting and things like that because of autophagy and mitophagy as well. Do you get these benefits? It sounds like you get these benefits regardless if you're just in that metabolic state that we see in fasting. Is that right, or is there a specific benefit to actually abstaining from eating?
So fasting definitely stimulates the process. The challenge is that in people with mental disorders, it appears that their mitochondria are severely impaired.
Mm-hmm.
And that impairment may actually include some of the essential fats, like omega-3 fatty acids, which are a fat, are an integral part of the mitochondrial membrane. And so fasting for a day or even a week, fasting isn't replacing any of the omega-3 fatty acids. You're actually not eating at all. Yeah. So fasting has some benefits, but if people have defects in mitochondria because of they're not getting essential nutrients, you mentioned carnitine, that's another critical one. If you don't have enough carnitine, fasting isn't going to solve that problem.
Yeah.
So I think that fasting can play a role, and certainly intermittent fasting coupled with a ketogenic diet or carnivore diet or some other diet can be really beneficial for some people. But you also do need to look at dietary strategies to make sure people are getting their essential nutrients to replenish and restore health and mitochondrial health and metabolic health.
Yeah, it makes sense. When I look at biochemistry, obviously, we learn and we teach that we have a fed state and a fasting state, and that you have this fasting mimicking diets, and keto and carnivore mimic fasting. But I think that we have that backwards. I think that so-called fasting state is actually our primary metabolic state. That's where sort of all the heavy machinery comes to bear. We work a lot better metabolically that way. And it's just that when you stop eating carbohydrates, then you get into this metabolic state. If I eat 4,000 calories of ribeye, I'm not fasting. And yet I'm in this so-called fasting metabolism. And that seems to be the same metabolism that most animals in the wild are in. And so I think that we've sort of misnamed that. I think that by the time we were able to look at things metabolic or our metabolism at a molecular level, everyone was just eating carbohydrates. So they just assumed that was the default state. But I think that certainly your work complements that entirely, that just being in this metabolic state confers significant benefits to our metabolism and just overall health, and particularly in our mitochondria.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm conscious of your time. I know you have a meeting coming up. I'd love to ask you about 1,000 more questions, but I don't want to. I don't want to keep you from your meeting. So we'll just stop with this. What does Dr. Palmer eat? What is your diet these days?
Lots of meat, eggs, and so I'm not carnivore. I am an omnivore, but I've been low carb. I've certainly done carnivore diet. Even 20 years ago, before the term carnivore was even coined, it was basically the zero carb diet is the way we would look at it. It's just like, do the Atkins diet, but don't eat anything other than meat or animal sourced foods, like nothing but meat and eggs and butter. Just eat that. So I have certainly done that along the way and absolutely noticed benefits. There is no question about it. I'm really interested in some of these bigger picture questions too. I would love to see some longitudinal studies comparing, carnivore diet versus omnivore ketogenic diet versus a vegan diet versus, a Mediterranean diet. And let's really see some long-term health outcomes in people so that we can create a more robust medical database and give people more accurate information.
I think that would be great, and I would love to be involved in something like that. And I think hopefully it will be. I mean, there was a study that just came out of Harvard. It was, it was one of these nutritional survey sort of things, but it's a start. It's at least it's catching people's interest. It did have quite remarkable self-reported outcomes, but I think that that's at least enough to get people sort of interested in and on the scent. So hopefully that sparks bigger studies from here.
Absolutely, yeah.
Definitely. Well, Dr. Palmer, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. How do people get a hold of you? How do they find your book and support your work?
The easiest place is brainenergy.com. So all one word, brainenergy.com. If you go there, you can learn more about the work. You can actually join the newsletter. We are hoping to start a grassroots movement. We want to change the mental health field. We want to do so much. Lots of free information available. You can network with people. You can follow me on social media, all there.
Perfect. Well, I'll put all those links up in the show notes as well. And I encourage everyone to follow your work and get the book as well. It's absolutely excellent. I'm only halfway through it, but it's already very, very eye-opening. I'm looking forward to the rest. Dr. Palmer, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Dr. Chafee. Thank you.